Hi, I'm Andrew Levine, the CEO of Koinos Group, and in this video, I want to talk about a big change that I think is happening to Tesla Motors based on the earnings call that happened last night. This video is for my personal YouTube channel, and the idea with this channel is to create a place where I can be less scripted and kind of talk off the top of my head in a way that I can't and probably shouldn't on other channels like my company's YouTube channel, Koinos Group, or the blockchain YouTube channel for Koinos. I've been a Tesla shareholder from right after it IPO'd, so I've been following the company for a long time. And one of the things I always liked that they did is that they published their secret plan. And that plan outlined their mission, and they've always been super clear that their mission is to accelerate the advent of sustainable transport. And actually, even before the earnings call last night, I'd heard Musk mention that the Optimus subprime robot isn't really in line with their mission. And I heard him mention it once, and I thought, that's interesting. That's a weird admission, but this is kind of maybe a gimmick. Maybe this isn't something that they're super serious about, so I kind of dismissed it. But then in last night's earnings call, he really doubled down on Optimus subprime, as kind of the future of Tesla. And it's not really clear how that fits into the idea of sustainable transport. And one of the things that I think really highlights this fact is what happened to the stock price this morning, because by any objective metric, the earnings call last night was fantastic. And that's always been Tesla's problem, is that objective metrics, it was bad because it was a growth company, because all of the value was in the future. And so the objective metrics that you use to evaluate most companies were bad. And here you have Tesla coming out last night saying we have tons of growth, we have tons of margin, and we're really going to focus on shipping our high margin cars next year. And that's kind of the objective things that people, specifically analysts, want to see from a company. Meanwhile, the stock goes down significantly. And I think that's because of the conflict between the old mission and what I think of as the new mission. And I'm not blaming Musk for this. I don't think it's a bad thing. That's what I want to talk about in this video. I think it's a good thing. In one of my previous videos on this channel, I talked about how one finds their mission and the mission of their company, and how those might not be the same things, and how crucially it's a process and your mission can change over time. And the idea shouldn't be to just pull something out of thin air and stick to it forever. It's to understand who you are, what motivates you, keep learning about who you are and what motivates you, and most importantly, keep learning about your team and what motivates your team and what kind of products they put out, not what kind of products they say they're going to put out. You have to look at what people actually produce, because what people say they're going to produce and what they actually produce can be two very different things, just like what people say and what people do can be two different things. I can say I'm a good person, but I can do all kinds of things that actually define a bad person. And so you as the entrepreneur, as the person who's trying to improve themselves, need to be constantly evaluating and reevaluating yourself and your team and what you guys are doing together. And so how do you explain this big stock price drop this morning, given the objective results of last night? Well, I think what explains it is that people with a lot of money, not consciously, but probably more unconsciously, were reacting to what was expressed in the earnings call, which was a fundamental shift in the mission of the company. And that scares people. That's typically a very, very bad sign. You don't want companies changing gear midway. You're having fantastic results. Why change anything? But what these people don't understand is that when done right, if you have an opportunity to change your mission in support of a larger vision, then that's exactly what you want to do, as long as you can back it up, as long as you have the human resources, the bodies, the talent, the skill, the intelligence to actually execute on this new mission. And so what I think happened, and you have to remember the story of Tesla. This was not a company that Elon Musk started. It was started by a guy named Martin Eberhard, and I forget the other co-founder. And Musk was just an investor who wanted to spend all of his time building a crazy space company. And he understood that sustainable transport was important. He'd been interested in electric vehicles since he was in college, going to graduate school originally to study ultracapacitors for use in automotive, I think. And so he wanted to put his capital behind this, but he didn't want to run it full time. And so he supported the development of this company. He helped it grow. He exerted strong influence over it until the day came that the original leadership proved themselves inept and needed to be replaced, and somebody needed to replace them. And he took on that responsibility, and he crafted the company in his vision. He found that mission, he embodied that mission, he promoted that mission, which was an ambitious mission to build a new car company that would be so impactful it would accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles, thereby accelerating the advent of sustainable transport. That is a huge, massive, ambitious goal. And I think what happened to them over the course of these decades, I mean, how long has the company been around now? At least 10 years. And is that they've had tremendous success. They've had tremendous growth. They've attracted better engineering, the best engineering talent in the world. And they've demonstrated that they are not just a car company. Very clearly, they are not just a car company. They are more like a tech company. They make computers, they make batteries, they make battery storage solutions, right? They've gotten involved in solar. So they've become a robotics company. And at a certain point, you have to take a step back. And what they've realized is, hey, all this stuff that we wound up building for the car that would have been crazy to think about at the beginning. They didn't even have autopilot in their vision at the beginning. That wasn't part of their plan. They were just building electric cars. And autopilot came about in a very organic way that I think a lot of people don't even understand, which is, I believe that the reason that they actually developed autopilot, and I learned this from a guy who used to be a scrum master at Tesla, was that they were trying to figure out a way to automate testing of the cars so that they can make more frequent upgrades to the cars without having to go back through all of the crash testing and regulatory things, right? So they had to have these simulations going on in the car at all times so that they can push an upgrade to the fleet, test it in live environments in the background, right? So they're not actually pushing it to the car so that it's operational. They're pushing it to the car so that it's running in the background in kind of, I think it was called shadow mode. And then they're evaluating whether the change would have any negative impact on the safety. And so by setting up this simulation and this constant testing, which is something that is crucial to modern software development, they were able to more rapidly iterate on the car. And it's that software development that led to autopilot, because it wasn't that much more of a reach from, hey, let's use these simulations to allow the car to navigate itself through space. Right. And so, fast forward a number of years, and now all of a sudden they realize, like, hey, all this stuff that we're developing for the cars, this image recognition stuff, this machine learning stuff, hey, if we put it in a humanoid robot, we've got a humanoid robot that can navigate through space and deliver insane amounts of value. And at a certain point, you have to go, well, if we can do that, and if the value is really that big, then how can we not do it? And so what does this have to do with their mission, and where are they going? I think it would be a very bad thing if they didn't know what their new mission is. But I think they do know what it is. Maybe they haven't formulated it perfectly in their minds, or maybe they just don't want to publicize it yet because it sounds crazy. And that's actually something that you have to be super considerate about as an entrepreneur. You very often see people, entrepreneurs, coming out and espousing these crazy lofty goals, and of course they never meet them, and of course those companies fail because they were far too ambitious. They were biting off far more than they can chew. And that is the role of the entrepreneur, to be appropriately measured. You want to aim big, but you don't want to be crazy in a way that ultimately sabotages yourself. So even if you have grand ambitions, you have to be very deliberate about how you express those, even internally, because you don't want people internally to think you've lost your mind. Instead, you want to validate the idea. You want to test it on a few people. You want to see if it's really achievable. You want to see if the timelines are actually reasonable. You have to think through whether capital markets and investors will support the move, right? You have to think about everything. You have to engineer everything. And I think that what has now been clearly demonstrated is that Elon Musk is the greatest engineer in the world. And you might think I'm a fanboy, that this has anything to do with me liking him or disliking him, and it doesn't. I don't know the person. I think it's objectively true that he's the greatest engineer in the world because I'm using the broadest definition of the term. Yes, he's a good mechanical engineer and a good software engineer, but he engineers capital markets. He engineers manufacturing plants. He engineers crypto markets. That's probably what a lot of people don't like about him, is how much influence he has over so many different areas. He engineers people on top of all of those other things. And that's why capital flows to him, and why capital wants him ultimately pursuing the largest vision he is physically and mentally capable of following. They want to empower the world's greatest engineer to have maximum impact, and that's why he's the richest person in the world. So what is this new mission that's so crazy that they don't want to talk about it, and that's spooking investors and causing some amount of capital flee from Tesla, but motivating me to invest even more? Now, this isn't investing advice. That new mission is to accelerate the transition to a sustainable economy. A sustainable economy. They were thinking too small before. They just wanted to make transportation sustainable. And they've already demonstrated that they are leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else in doing that. But in the process of doing that, they realized that there is an even bigger opportunity for them, which is that they can be the company that makes the entire economy sustainable, which it is not. And if you can support that transition, and if people can believe that you will be the foundation of that new economy, then the potential value of that company is infinite, because value, or at least the potential price on those shares, is infinite, because the value is incalculable. And this feeds into a broader theory that I've had for the last 10, 15 years, which is that over the last 30 to 50 years, what we've seen is a secular decline in confidence of public institutions. The government, the state, call it what you want. People have been, sorry, I have a cat here that wants to get involved. People have been losing confidence in public institutions. And when that happens, there's only one place or one sector for them to go, and that's private institutions, private companies, private organizations. That's why I'm so heavily invested in blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies, and why we're building Koinos, because we want Koinos to be another public organization that gives that supports a sustainable and decentralized economy, and why I think capital will continue to flow into those markets, and why capital will ultimately flow into Koinos as the blockchain with the lowest barriers to entry. But as time goes forward, the government is going to be less, and public institutions, if you want to differentiate them, federal government, state governments, municipalities, whatever, they're all going to be less involved with providing the valuable products and services that we all need. Now, this is not a value judgment. This is not something I want or do not want to happen. I think that that's something that people have confused with me, have been confused about over the years when I talk about this. This is not about what I want to happen. This is about what I see happening. And I make my decisions based on what I see happening and the type of world I want to allow to exist. So when I see that faith and confidence in public organizations is going to collapse and eventually go to practically zero, I want there to be a technology in existence, in place, that is going to fill that gap and support the important products and services that we need, things like healthcare, things like finances, insurance, all the most important things. I want to make sure that the technological infrastructure is still there to give us everything that we need, because I see these collapses coming. And if those things aren't available and in place, then that's when you usually get fascistic regimes, highly centralized, tyrannical regimes, because all of the public institutions collapse. And now people are afraid and hungry and angry and looking for somebody to blame. And so that's when a strong man comes to power and people say, hey, you fix all of this stuff. But if we have the technological infrastructure in place that allows the people to fill that gap themselves, then we can avoid potential negative outcomes. But that doesn't mean that crypto is going to solve every problem, far from it. And I think private corporations, and I hope public organizations as well. Part of the reason I'm building Koinos is because I want public institutions to be able to leverage this technology to survive and thrive through decentralization. So it's not a value judgment on any one of those things. And the future could go any number of ways. The point is to build Koinos so that it can support all of those potential directions while pushing things in a more decentralized direction. And that's because we have ideological beliefs about decentralization and its importance. And if you don't like that, you shouldn't get involved in crypto, blockchain, or Coinos. Now, getting back to Tesla and the idea that they're transitioning to a new mission, which is to accelerate the transition to a sustainable economy, what I'm talking about and what I've believed for a long time, because I always thought Tesla was going to go into solar. Oh, it was so obvious. His cousin's over there building this company that was his idea, right? So they were going to go into energy production. By the way, Tesla Solar is a decentralized energy production system. You've got solar panels on all the houses that Tesla owns, soaking up the sun and feeding it into their private energy system. They have, massive stationary battery storage to support their private energy generation system. And then they have their cars, right? So it was very clear that Tesla was already going to fill many of the roles that we expect from public utilities, public organizations, right? Power provision, transport. In the call yesterday, Musk said how buses are probably going to be obsolete once the Tesla fleet gets FSD, right? What is that? That is replacing public infrastructure with private Tesla-owned infrastructure. So the elimination of public services, the replacement with private services that are cheaper. Now, again, this isn't a value judgment. This isn't something I want to happen, but this is something that is likely to happen because these are the macro level trends that have been in place for the last 50 years and cannot just be changed overnight, and certainly can't be changed by tweaking little pieces of the government or public institutions here and there. And so what Musk has realized, what I think probably everyone at Tesla is coming around to, is that this company has to do much more than build electric cars. It is going to replace more and more of the public sector. One company filling in the vacuum left by an ever diminishing government. People might be thinking, but the government is consuming more of GDP every year. It's huge. It's bigger than ever, but it isn't productive. In fact, it's highly burdened by debt, and that debt prevents it from being productive. In fact, at this point, it is incapable of even sustaining itself. Despite the narrative, despite the marketing, the government is decaying faster than it is upgrading. And so no matter what they think they're doing and how well they think they're doing it, things are just going to continue getting worse and worse and worse. And the consequence of that is that people are going to be looking more and more to the private sector, and investors are going to be looking more and more to the private sector. And that's one of the reasons why the stock market keeps going up. That's one of the reasons why the dollar keeps becoming more valuable despite all of the money printing. But you have to disconnect the money printing and the actions of the Fed from the underlying economy. The private sector and the public sector are separate things. They're interconnected, but they are fundamentally at odds. And this is the fundamental dichotomy within the economy, private versus public. The only thing higher is the economy. And people move between those sectors by investing in bonds or treasury bills for the public sector, or muni bonds for the public sector, and private stocks for the private sector. And so if confidence continues to decline in the public sector, if the public sector continues to be less productive, which is guaranteed, economically guaranteed by a debt burden, then there's only one place for things to go. And when you're talking about the stewardship of the economy, that's what we're talking about here. Traditionally, we believe, we trust the government to have stewardship over the economy and move it in the right direction. Can you honestly say that you have confidence in the government as a steward of the economy, that enough people, that the majority of people have the confidence of the government as a steward of the economy at this point? And this is not liberal or conservative. Please don't interpret it that way. I'm honestly just asking you to ask yourself, think about the people around you, liberal and conservative. Do people have confidence that the government will steward, right? Because the government's made up of liberals and conservatives. Sorry, I have a baby in the other room, if you can hear crying. Do the people have confidence in the government as a steward of the economy to move it in a sustainable direction, to move it in a direction that increases abundance and helps the people at the bottom without discouraging people from striving to be on the top, to minimize our impact on the environment and ensure that the world we give our children will be at least as good as the world we have today? Of course, people don't believe in the government as a trustworthy steward of the economy anymore, and that will only get worse. Maybe it won't, in which case my analysis would change. But if the trend stays in the same direction, then the only place for people to look for stewards of the economy will be the private sector. And what Tesla is setting itself up as now is as the top number one steward, led by the person that the most amount of capital has chosen as their steward for that capital. That's what Tesla is becoming. It is becoming our hope for a sustainable economy, and the single most valuable product one could create, if that was their mission, was an electric, artificially intelligent humanoid robot. And so people are really missing the forest for the trees if they're thinking that this change in mission is a bad thing. It's an amazing thing. It's an exciting future. It's an exciting transition that they are the most strategically positioned to execute, because the two biggest challenges for delivering a humanoid robot to the mass market is the artificial intelligence component, the machine learning, the ability to create a robot that can navigate through space autonomously, and manufacturing. Manufacturing moving robots at scale. And there's no one in the world better at that than Tesla.